Oh, apparently it's doing a live status bar now, so we've got still got to wait. Oh, here we go. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Thanks so much for joining us today. We're just waiting for one more person, so hopefully they will pop up on the screen very soon. Today's panel, we're going to be talking about the future of music journalism. And I'm sure you've noticed over the past few years that the landscape of the media has been changing slightly, and there are a lot of music publications in print that have no longer survived. They're not with us anymore, including titles like Q and Mixmag in the UK and Groove in Germany. And unfortunately, sadly, COVID-19 has accelerated the fate of some of those best-loved titles. So I'm Nicki from Global Publicity. I'm going to be your host today. And we've got a great panel of people with us, speakers from the UK and Spain, who work across different sectors of the industry. So hopefully we'll get some great thoughts on this subject from different areas. So let's go to our panelists who can introduce themselves and give a brief info about themselves. So let's start with you, Carlos.
My name is Carlos Pérez de Ciriza. I write for some magazines and papers in Spain. General magazines, general papers like El País, for example, music magazines like Mondo Sonoro, FM, and I am freelance, so I just work on writing about music, and that's my job from many years ago. Well, I hope I can say something interesting today.
I'm sure you will. And you, Charlie.
Oh, sorry, you cut out slightly. Hi, I'm Charlie Dunn. I am a journalist, also an editor. I was formerly the editor of Enemy in the UK. Throughout the time when it moved from print to digital only. And in December, I left that role to set up a new music publication online again called The 45. And it's manned by a team of brilliant female creatives in the industry.
Perfect, and hopefully Paul will join us very soon. We're just having problems logging in, so as usual the tech is against us, but I'm sure we can manage. So let's start with my first question. I'm going to aim this at Charlie because I think what she's been doing is really interesting because you know, you've launched a new music publication, as you just said, during a pandemic, which is probably, people would think you must be crazy. Yeah. So you know, I'd love to know more about that, why you felt this was the right time to do this, and what's your vision for the publication?
Well, I'd been at Enemy a couple of years. Well, I'd been there 5 years. I'd been editor for 2. I was really proud of where we got it to in terms of re-establishing it as a sort of successful digital-only brand after it had such a kind of lengthy print legacy. And yeah, it felt like it's just something that I'd wanted to do. I'd been more involved there with trying to support female talent in the industry, both in terms of journalists, creatives, and artists coming through. And it was something I was really passionate about. So decided to, try and set up my own thing. I will say, when I decided to do this, there wasn't a pandemic going on. So I perhaps would have maybe approached things slightly differently had I known the way the world was going. But in many ways, it's been great because I've had just so much time to focus on it, no distractions. And I've found it like an incredibly productive period. So as well, the support from everyone's been amazing. I think particularly because it's been such a difficult time for everyone working in music. Everyone's been very supportive and open to a new thing to talk about and a new place to, you know, push their artists, to support talent, and so whilst it's challenging in many ways, it's also been great, and the reception to it's been really positive.
Yeah, that's really good to hear some positive news, isn't it? Because as I mentioned before, a lot of the publications have been closing or finding it really difficult. So it's great to have some kind of positive kind of feedback, you know, on new publications launching. I'm just seeing in the chat that Paul can't seem to enter and he's watching and not as a speaker. So hopefully he will get to join us soon. So apologies for that. So Charlotte, you did mention some of the challenges. So can you maybe go over some of those, the challenges of launching the new publication and obviously during the pandemic, what you faced?
Definitely. I mean, I think the same for everyone. You know, the closure of incredible titles like Q, it's such a shame to see. You know, that was a really quality publication and one that everybody really respected and loved. Same goes to McNeill. And yeah, I can't profess to have all the answers to the challenges that those brands face. You know, advertising revenue is difficult, with more so with online content, really, in many ways, because the revenue that you get from kind of on-page display advertising is difficult. But the benefit, or what I've been able to do as an independent person and a very small team, is just start it really kind of lean with it's really just me and freelancers. So for that reason, our cost base is very low. You know, it's run out of my flat. And so whereas those kind of bigger publishers probably had a lot more overheads and challenges financially, I think I'm in a position where I can kind of scale up and scale down dependent on how things are going. But yeah, so, you know, commercial revenue is a challenge. I've worked, you know, prior to my time at Enemy, I've worked in digital publishing for about 13 years and have learned a lot about strange noise. I wonder what that is. Building audiences over that time, and I think that sort of is a real benefit in that kind of however you're trying to grow website traffic, whether it's on a food website or a music website, it's all, the principles are all kind of the same. So yeah, I know a fair bit about that. But as well, I suppose artists access, there are no gigs to review, which is, you know, a big strand of the type of content we would be producing is sort of ruled out. But there's lots of interesting stuff coming out of the sort of virtual gig space that gives us a lot to talk about. So challenges, but positives too.
Oh, that's really good to hear, though. But it's interesting to hear those different things. So, Carlos, let's go to you on that, because obviously you're a freelance journalist, writing for many different publications across print and online. So what challenges have you faced during this time?
I think that the main problem now for the music magazines, the music publications, is that they have been relying so much on the advertisements from the music industry, you know. So now that the music industry is stopped and they have no money to invest in publicity, in advertisements, I think the challenge for the music magazines is to open themselves to other fountains, other sources of finance. I mean, they have to be aware that they have to have announcements and advertisements from any kind of company or industry that is not so linked to the music industry. For example, here in Spain, music magazines tend to rely always on the festivals. I mean, we have many festivals here in Spain each summer, and now they don't know if they're going to be held not this year, because they are not held, but they don't even know if they're going to be held next year. So I think that we have to, all of us, I mean, the people who own the media, the people who own the magazines, and the people who write for them, we have to open our minds and take this crisis as an opportunity. I know it sounds like a cliche to say this, but we have to try to open our minds and try to envisage that music is an essential part of our society, and we have to find the ways to connect with people, with other audiences that maybe are not the traditional ones. Because if you look at the traditional magazines, for example, I could say Uncut or Mojo, you look at the covers and you always see the same bands and the same musicians from 30 or 40 decades ago. And that's good. I mean, that's it. That's the niche that we have to cover. That's good because the public and the audience is there. But we have to try to connect with other audiences, more diverse, and it requires imagination. It requires many things that we have to try.
No, it's really interesting you say that the challenges are very similar in the different countries. Just going to quickly welcome Paul in there. You made it. The technology worked in the end. Welcome, welcome. If you could briefly introduce yourself and tell us people a bit about what you do.
Well, are you hearing me?
Yeah.
Excellent. Apologies. Yes, I wasn't the speaker apparently. So I run something called Record of the Day, a music industry publication that largely is a summary of other news and features that are out there, as I say, on a daily basis. But we also feature one track every day, an editorially chosen track. So we are writing about new music as well. And that came out of two things that I did previously. One called Tip Sheet, which was a print publication, kind of similar in a way, talking about new music and the industry side. And then a .com called Click Music, which started doing a free daily email there, which again, pretty similar really, talking about new music and but had no business model to it.
Cool. And just quickly to summarise before you joined, while you were having your wonderful tech issues, Charlie was just talking about how she launched her new publication, The 45, which you're probably aware of anyway. And Carlos was talking about his issues as a freelancer in the different publications he was writing for, he works for in Spain. And he was just talking about the kind of media landscape there. So maybe Carlos, you could just finish that off. You know, how has the kind of music media landscape been changing in Spain over the past few years?
Well, good way to look at that, I suppose, is we used to do music journalism and PR awards, as you well know.
Oh yeah, I was a winner.
For a decade up until 2012, and in that time, I think we saw both industries change an awful lot. From publications where, you know, I've sort of had PR say to me they were very excited about maybe getting a front cover of a weekly or a monthly publication, to it's sort of just being like, yeah, it's fine, but didn't really sort of seem to, as we say, move the needle as much as it used to. And then on the PR side, I think there was a point where you could sort of say that a PR might have helped something quite specifically, and it was easier to point out how that was part of an artist's story along the way. And all of a sudden, things like Twitter came along, and an artist or a footballer would tweet about something, and it just seemed to have more impact. And it was a bit disillusioning, I think. And now, you know, from 2012 onwards, it's sort of a continuing story of that, I suppose. It's very, very mixed.
Well, this kind of brings me very well onto my next question, actually, because obviously we've been talking about the decline of print music publications. So what are your views on digital versus print? How is that evolving? What do you think the benefits are, pros and cons, etc.? I know Charlie's very vocal on this.
Yeah, well, I just heard Uncut mentioned there. I spoke to a friend last week who said that apparently they're doing pretty well at the moment, actually. And although they are recycling old NME features and that kind of thing, there are a generation of probably blokes who have more time on their hands in the middle of lockdown, and you know, they've probably picked up some from Q magazine as that folded. Probably not going to see a lot of print launches. I think it's probably fair to say, kind of. And digital, there's definitely things out there. Congratulations, Charlotte. And,
oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean that seems, you know, I don't know what your business model is, but just picking a niche seems a good thing to do. And
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see, I think. Ask me in 6 months.
Right, okay.
Well, Charlie, I know you're very vocal on the digital versus print kind of discussion, because you've said that sometimes there's a bit of snobbery towards online, and as Paul just said, some people are still desperate to have a cover, and that still means something. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. One thing we did when the magazine closed at NME was introduce digital covers, which is just as it sounds, a mocked up cover image which is shared on social. And initially I was like, I don't know if this is going to wash or whether people are going to care about this, but they actually did seem to, and artists seemed don't know as into it, but like very receptive to, we're on the cover of NME still, which for a digital only publication still really meant something. So I think
from a PR point of view, we had plenty of press releases come in, say NME front cover artist of the week.
Right.
I think the PR still appreciated it as well.
Right, yeah. So I think that did that was a way that we kind of made that transition from print to digital, and by still sort of staying true to some of the things that made print so special in a way. But I think, yeah, there is still some snobbery, which seems mad to me, considering if anyone kind of considered how much they use their phone to read stuff. But there's no denying there are real differences between the two. Long form content, whilst is much more engaging now online, and there are kind of different ways you can lay it out, you're still reading something on a fairly small screen, and so people's attention spans are shorter than sitting back with a magazine. And also, just the way that you have to capture people's attention with online content, which I think is something I mentioned to you, Nicki, that people often call sort of the art of headline writing clickbait. But I think clickbait is a very specific type of thing. And the fact is, online, you do just have to, every piece of content, you're sort of fighting for someone to read it. So there is a kind of different way you need to present that than just assuming people come to your homepage and read from front to back of a website. Like, nobody really does that. So unless you're a really, really established brand like The Guardian or something like that, where you've built up that super, super loyal audience and people will come several times a day to see what you're doing. But if you look at sort of website trends, that is quite rare for people to behave that way on a site. So there are just lots of different factors, but I don't think it means that quality needs to suffer. I think you just need to be mindful of the way that people are consuming content, whether it's audio content or video content, or just using visuals in a more stimulating way to kind of make the quality music journalism that you're creating sort of resonate with the most amount of people.
So let's go to Carlos on that, because you're a writer and obviously you write for print and online. So how does it differ for the articles that you're writing for those different publications? Do you change the style you're writing or the length of the piece? How does that work?
I think it changed, not the style. I mean, the style is more or less the same, but it changes the point of view, in the sense that when you write for paper magazines, I mean, we have to accept that there are some contents that cannot be read in a mobile phone or in an iPad or in a laptop, because it's difficult to be there more than 5 or 10 minutes reading the same piece. So when I write for papers, they tend to be longer articles, longer reports, and they tend to have more historical point of view. I mean, more historical point of view, more detail to the social historical content, and you have to cover all those aspects that you have not enough time to cover when you write for online publications. So I think that's the key, even for the survival of the paper of the printed magazines, because maybe they shouldn't be so I don't know how to say it. I mean, maybe they are bound to be not monthly, not weekly, but maybe trimestral or bimestral, something like that. I mean, not so periodical, but they have to give. For example, in Spain, I give so many credit to the market of music books. In Spain, in the last 5 or 10 years, there's been an upheaval of books related to music, and I think they sell well. I mean, maybe they are not. You can think about that. Maybe they sell 1,000, 2,000 each book, but maybe it's enough to not to be rich, but to maintain some level. So, if there are people who want to read books about their favorite musicians, their favorite artists, there has to be people who want to read about them in magazines. Maybe not weekly magazines or monthly magazines, but something that can give them some way to talk about long stories about music. You know, people want to hear stories always. If you are able to tell a good story and a long story, that's something that it's never going to be useful to read in a mobile phone or in a laptop. So I think that maybe the future for the printed magazines, at least in Spain, maybe it goes in that way. So in terms of writing, more or less it's the same, you know, but you have to change the point of view or the historical length of what you are writing about, depending if you are writing for a paper or for online.
Something
really
sorry.
I was just
going to say something either.
Go for it, Charlotte.
Sorry. Yeah, it's a very quick point. Something that I think it's either the New York Times or the New Yorker do with their long reads online is they use a service where somebody, not the journalist, does an audio reading of the long form piece. So the journalist is still, you know, they're a writer, they're best equipped to write the kind of 3,000 word piece on whoever, but then they get a sort of professional voiceover person to do an audio version, which I think is just it was something that I had not seen elsewhere, and was a really good way of sort of using the talents of the writer, but presenting it in a way that maybe was more accessible.
They've done some really good sort of magazine style features as well, haven't they? Where they're, I don't know, sort of big pictures, and then you swipe and it kind of goes up and down, and it isn't just one long block of text. It's a bit more. You're a bit more
exactly.
Yeah, and I guess with the growth. I was going to say, and with the growth of podcasts as well, I guess, you know, it comes back to Carlos's point, people are, and Charlie said earlier, how people are consuming media in different ways. So if someone wants to consume audio, make sure you've got that form, make sure you've got a long form, make sure you've got a short article, just to cater for a wider audience. And obviously videos become more important as well.
Yeah.
So, and we all talked about content there. So let's talk about that. Obviously, you need to create stories and articles that people want to read. How do you stay ahead, you know, with the competition of all the social media and all the fan music blogs, and everyone's an expert now? How do you make sure you've got articles that maintain your audience and engage your audience, and that people want to read? Who wants to go for that first?
Not quite my world, I suppose, but
well, I don't. Yeah, I think the change since I started working in online publishing in 2007, and then it was all about just sort of gaming search engines with, like, you know, if you write this keyword in the headline, then you'll rank well. And you know, a change that Google's really prioritized probably in the last 8 years is about quality. So it's got these various quality metrics that help determine whether something is a good piece of journalism, and therefore they'll rank it higher in search results as a result. And you know, it's telling of people's behavior online in that they are looking for quality. And I think you can't win by just churning out sort of regurgitated news stories, or just doing sort of unoriginal stuff, really. So I mean, being original and writing well or creating good quality stuff, it sounds so basic, but I think that's really how
do you feel sort of as good as your last feature that you've published? Like you've just got to keep doing that quality, otherwise people will switch off?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment for sure, because we're so new, the 45 is so new and it doesn't really have that established base, but yeah, certainly at Enemy, with a brand like that, everyone's just sort of felt like the whole of Twitter was occasionally waiting for you to do something wrong so they could pounce on you. But you know, everyone, I'd say once you're more established, less so, but yeah, it's certainly a bit of an endless hamster wheel of ideas. Sometimes it can feel like that anyway, but yeah.
And how about you, Carlos? Obviously, you're writing features all the time for publications. You know, does it help that you're experienced and people know who you are, so you get those big interviews or you get those big features? How does it work for you, writing content for those different publications?
Well, you were talking about the social media, and I think that's interesting because, nowadays everyone can express their opinions about anything. But I think that that's true. I mean, all of us, even if we are not journalists, we can say our opinion about anything. But I think that journalists, I think that maybe because of that, the criteria of journalists, of music journalists, is so important today, because we have to make like some kind of filter between what is being recorded and what really arrives to the public, to the audience. I want to think that. I mean, I am not sure if we do it, but I like to think that we do it. And it's strange when you share your articles in the social media and you see the reactions of people and what they talk about. It's strange because you have to be kind to people who read about you. You have to sometimes answer whatever people may say about any article or any report. At the same time, be careful not to annoy anyone. But you have to maintain this balance. I mean, between, for one part, trying to be careful about the image you want to give about yourself and about your work, and at the same time not being so disdainful or disrespectful to anyone. But there's another aspect about the social media, and is that sometimes I don't know if social media is making us more aware of all the worlds that are surrounding us. I will try to explain myself. For example, the social media are always like congregating people around the same ideas, around the same likes, around the same tastes. So maybe, the risk is that once we are there, we are distributing, publishing our work in the social media because it's something necessary. We are risking that maybe we tend to think that the people who are reading in the same social media are the real world, but it's just a tiny aspect of the world. I mean, it's just a tiny circle of people who are reading you. I sometimes get the feeling that when I publish something, half of the people who are reading me are also journalists.
Yeah.
So that's really, that's, that's not something good. That's something that should really worry us. We have to reach more people, but social media is not something that connects you with people who doesn't think, who does think different from you. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. I think when I joined Enemy, I hadn't worked in music previously. I was just a music fan, and I had a lot of experience in digital publishing, but I think it was a benefit because I was sort of coming to it like a fan, and then more and more as time goes on, I feel like I get sucked into music industry land, where you think a band is important because 3 other journalists are talking about it, but really it's not real. It's not what like actual real music fans are talking about or thinking about. So I think you're completely right, Carlos. It's
it reaches the point in which I know perfectly which kind of bands and musics are going to be. I mean, if I write, for example, something about this particular band, is going to be read by my readers, because, for example, if I write something about a trap band, a trap or an R&B band, for example, I know it's not going to be read by the people who follows me on social media as many other contents that maybe are also interesting. So, I mean, you get to know so well the people you are writing for that I don't know until which, I don't know if that's really good enough. I mean, for reaching other audiences, I mean.
Any chance of that mass media coming back, of reaching anything reaching a massive audience now?
Who is that to? Just generally?
Well, generally, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, things can reach so many people online, but it tends to be not the things that you think should.
Yeah, I mean, just TikTok is the only way to.
Right.
Yeah, because now Facebook is a social media for people who are older than 30 or 40 years old. It's considered like that. I mean, now there are many bands now that are being famous via TikTok. I mean, for them, even YouTube is something old. So that's really a challenge.
No, it's interesting how things are changing, isn't it? So let's kind of talk about how you think music journalism is perceived today, because obviously there are, we've talked about how many people are online. Everyone has an opinion. There are lots of fan music blogs, etc. What is the value of a music critic? Because I know some of my journalist friends are saying because it's online, they then get approached by managers or PR saying, oh, we don't like that, you have to change it. And because it's online, it can be changed. Yeah. So, whereas before you would just respect the music critic and an article would go in print and you would accept it and accept their opinion. So do you think that's changed? And do you think there is still a value of music journalism and a music critic?
Definitely think there's still value in them. It was a bit horrifying to read or to hear if, people are asking for things to be changed. But I guess that's what we're doing with it now, isn't it?
Definitely does happen. That a lot.
Yeah, I think so.
But it's you just have to be firm, or the editor has to be firm and just say they won't do it. Like that's how you maintain the sort of integrity of something. But I find with reviews, it's weird because I think writing a negative review now feels like such a statement, and that it will almost get more traction on social, more traffic probably than writing a positive one. So not that would ever be a tactic, but I think it feels like a much bigger consideration to do a negative review now.
Drowned in Sound occasionally would give a 1-star review, and yes, you're absolutely right. It felt like, it blew up, because of that. It's like,
yeah. I think recent examples that I could think of, the Independent gave, I think the new 1975 album 1 or possibly even 0. No, I think it was 1. And then they have such a fervent fan base on Twitter. It just sort of it became so wild. But then also, for the actual journalist that's written the piece, then you're kind of opening yourself up to quite nasty trolling. So it's sort of, from an editor's point of view, you have to be okay with potentially damaging that relationship ongoing with the artist, which I guess you would be if you wanted to publish that review. But then also, I think there is a bit of a duty of care to the writer in a way, or just sort of that they're going to feel the wrath of the stands.
Because we sort of, monitor all the papers in particular. The last U2 and Mumford & Sons albums had 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-star reviews in the papers
Right.
that particular day it came out. And
Wow.
all right, not everybody's going to see all of those, but you're left wondering a bit.
Yeah.
Yes, you agree, of course, but it's,
One thing I would say is, though, that, we have theatre critics, restaurant critics. I mean, one of my favourites is Giles Cohen. He writes scathing reviews of restaurants and still in a job and does well in his column. So, those industries seem to be able to still write negative views, or, so why should it be so hard in music to be negative if you feel that's the case?
Yeah. Is there that sort of a restaurant is a standalone thing, and actually all other restaurants are probably quite grateful that they've got kind of put the rival down, and the music side is more interconnected with labels.
Yeah, maybe you're right. It's maybe the labels and representing different artists, and you're worried about missing out on that next big headliner opportunity to interview a big name. I don't know.
Yeah.
And fans as well, like restaurants, I guess, don't really have fans in the same way. So, yeah.
Maybe theatre's the same as well then. So it's much more complicated in the music landscape to be a critic and be negative.
It shouldn't be like that. I mean, it should be. That's right. I mean, maybe it's what we were talking about before. I mean, maybe music press is more dependent on advertisements from the music industry, or maybe you don't want to offend anyone when you write about a particular album. But I think that any opinion is valid unless you offend anyone. I mean, it's just a point of view about art. I mean, you are not insulting anyone by saying that his album is really bad for you. It's just your opinion. You just represent you, and I think that most of the people in the industry respect the work of the journalists when we write about a new album. But it's true what you say. I mean, it's harder to find a negative critic, a negative review today, and I don't know why. I think that's maybe because the profession is so badly paid nowadays that many people tend to write just about what they like, and that's a bad habit for me. I think you have to write about anything, about any kind of group. You don't have to limit yourself to always write about the kind of music that you like, because if we all keep doing that, the audience is not gonna know the difference between this band, the other band, and any other album, and that's a bad habit for journalism. I think we should try to write about anything and be faithful to our own feelings and to our own criteria about something, and don't be afraid of expressing it.
I think perhaps certainly something we noticed, I don't know if it's typical across the board, but sort of getting rid of that more traditional structure of reviews editor and reviews assistant, who were probably the gatekeepers of that a bit. So if you had a review coming in and it seemed off, then you would kind of say something. But otherwise, you've kind of got people commissioning things who are just sort of, who wants to do this? And then inevitably the people who are fans sort of go, oh yeah, okay, I'll do it. So I don't know, it's complicated. But I agree with you, Carlos. It means nothing if you're just getting someone who likes the band to write it every time.
No, that's a really interesting point. And I should say there's a few questions coming in, so we'll try and make time for those at the end. So if anyone else has a question, please do put it in the chat, and then we'll get to that hopefully with 10 minutes to go at the end. But I'd like to go back to something Carlos was saying about, obviously the pay and how it's difficult to be a journalist these days. So how do we encourage the new generation of journalists to come through the ranks? How do we get the new good writers coming through?
I think it's difficult. It's difficult. I mean, you have to believe in whatever you feel you are good at. I mean, if you tend to write because you like writing, you are a journalist or something like that, and you are passionate about music, you have to try it. I mean, but we cannot offer anything really spectacular about the professional prospect that it has. I mean, journalism is not well paid in generally speaking, and in culturally speaking less, even less. So it's difficult to encourage anyone who tries to dedicate his time to this job. I wouldn't know how to do it. I would say just that they have to trust their own instinct and cross their fingers.
But in terms of being influential about a new artist, I think if you're starting out now, you'd be quite pleased, wouldn't you? You've got all these digital tools to express your love of something and build an audience for yourself, not necessarily earning from it directly, but that seems a very positive thing.
Yeah, I would just recommend trying to be as multi-skilled as possible. So
yeah,
you know, but doing video interviews and things like that is not something that in any way comes naturally to me. Or I would say the whole of the team where I, you know, when I worked previously, but we sort of had to make ourselves okay with it because that's, you know, the way things are going. So practicing presenting as well as writing will do you well, I would imagine, and make you more employable and useful to people.
So,
yeah, I think so.
You have to know things across all disciplines then. So any new budding writers should be prepared to be audio, writing and video then.
Well, I mean, it's so hard. I don't think that's achievable really. And the ideal would be people invested in experts in each of those fields. But with budgets the way that they are, I think if you're good at interviewing someone, a good interview should translate whatever medium. So that's not to do down, you know, the writing and good writing, because it's a thing on its own and you shouldn't have to do everything. But I think if people wanted my advice, that would be it.
And do you think internships are still a good way to go? So, for example, Charlotte, do you offer any of those at 45 at the moment?
At the moment, everybody is paid. I have one social media intern at the moment who's helping with some social posting, building up the audience. But it's really hard. Like I couldn't have interned because I could when I started working, because I wouldn't have been able to afford it. So I think it is really exclusionary of people that don't come from privileged backgrounds to make that a route into the industry. That said, you know, having bylines and practicing, whether that's on your own blog or wherever, is so useful and invaluable. So I don't know about interning, but perhaps offering to write some things for people for free, just to kind of get your name out there. I wish it shouldn't be like that, but the budgets the way that they are, I think, yeah, sadly it is still a fact.
So Carlos, how about you? Obviously you're a freelancer. Have you mentored or helped any new writers that are looking to get into it?
Yeah, it's true what Charlie said. I mean, we have to be versatile. We have to be open to write, to make videos, to have a blog, to make podcasts, to be on the radio whenever it's possible. I mean, all of this is necessary for us today. And even when we talked about before, even to be on the social media all the time, sharing your articles and all your contents. So I think you have, I mean, the journalist now, not only in music, in every aspect, in any kind of journalism, has to be a very multitask worker.
What about you, Paul? Have you got any initiatives of getting kind of new writers into the job? I mean, obviously there are courses at university and college in doing it, but any good options for getting real experience?
Not really from us. We have had interns previously, but although we have an office, we're all working separately, and I'm probably in there more often now, but in normal times, just not around enough for anybody to come in, and I'm not quite sure what they're doing, to be perfectly honest. We sort of have our, again, we're slightly different from, we have our daily routine and a weekly publication we're building up to, but even that has sort of a limited amount of original content in it. So yeah, I mean, it'd probably be sort of playlist making or finding new tracks that someone could help us with. And there's probably, when we get 200 submissions a day, I would think.
Wow.
So everybody wants to go through those. But,
nice.
Yeah.
Well, that people don't realise there's a lot of hard work behind the scenes going through those as well. It's not just the glory of writing the piece. There's probably a lot of mundane stuff in the background going on as well, particularly with research, etc., listening to stuff.
Yeah, no, and for us, that email of do you want to review our double live CD? It's like, no, that's not what we do.
Oh, I'm going to go a couple of questions now, because I think it'd be nice to finish on what you think the future is. So one question we've had is from Louis, and he's saying one of the biggest challenges for an independent artist with small or no agency is to reach music journalists. And he says, even for an artist who makes not mainstream genre, so he's saying, for example, world folk, which is kind of what he does. He says, what would you advise is the best way to get a journalist to listen to your music, and how in advance the single album release date should you kind of get in touch with people?
Well, from my perspective, it's just people understanding what it is that we do, and I think every publication would say that. So yeah, as I've literally just said, don't approach us with a would we write about a double album, when that's absolutely not what we're looking for. So I think that yeah, just that understanding of individual publications helps enormously, and building that relationship with which you probably can do now, the publisher or the journalist there, so that you're working together towards it over time.
I think often not approaching people on staff and like going via freelancers who are kind of pitching things into people is maybe a better way. Like I put our new music writer where I was previously, he was just so overloaded with emails. It is really hard to kind of cut through that. So yeah, maybe a freelancer pitching into him is a better way to go, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the way to get into this world. But anyway, I think it's difficult. I have to say anyway that I am about to get involved in a new magazine here in Spain. I shouldn't say this, but I think that maybe there are people who have suicidal tendencies here, and they want to create new magazines. And I am about to get involved in a new one, and well, I hope it goes well. Maybe with some luck, it will begin next year, and we will try to make something that's really different from the usual music magazines that we know now. Because I think one of the problems about the music magazines, the general music magazines, I am not talking about a particular one, but I think one of the problems is that the contents, the format of the contents is being so rigid until now. I mean, it's all reviews about albums and reviews about live shows, and then some interviews. And if you don't get out of this circle, of this vicious circle of always reviews and interviews and just that, because people tend to read about it and they tend to think that we are like a chain between the labels and the audience, just doing reviews about everything. And I know it's difficult, but we should try to think about another kind of stories, more engaging, maybe longer, maybe stories that relate to other aspects of our society, not just music, but relating to music. I know it's difficult, but I think that's a way in which we can try to maintain this particular our job. I mean,
I think that's really, and actually that I wanted with the 45, which I don't think is happening yet as well as I would like it to, is for it to be more than just interviews and reviews. So perhaps back to your previous question, Nicki, of like how to be a successful music journalist is just maybe think more creatively about it and like pitch ideas that are more along those lines, like features, interesting takes on things that just haven't been covered before. Because if you look at all the stuff that's resonating online, it's really that it's not the kind of same Q&A with the person who's doing a press run who said the same quotes 5 times. It's something a bit different. So I guess think more just like a feature writer than a music journalist as such.
Yeah,
that's a really good tip, definitely. So we've got another question in here. Jose said, what do you do about fact checking? It seems that actually the websites just do copy and paste of press releases. How do artists avoid that? Interesting question. Obviously none of you do that, but there is a lot of that online for sure.
You have to check everything.
Yeah. I
mean there are many people who used to copy and paste, but that's an awful habit. And many blogs do it. Some websites do it. You sometimes get to know some particular text that you have been writing many years before, and you can read it in other people's hands. And that's something that has to be. I mean, I think that the audience has to be really aware of it, and we have to be accountable for that. I mean, we have to check everything, all the facts.
Counterintuitive. Back to my nerdy knowledge of Google algorithms. Like if you have the same content, like word for word on multiple pages, really only like the first person that ever published it will have any kind of success with that in Google. So it's fairly pointless working that way. And but I understand it, like the pressure to be constantly producing things for a website can cause that kind of thing to happen, I suppose. But yeah, it's not great.
And on to the next question, we have Guy, who I think I've pronounced that right. Apologies if I did not. In terms of the question, I think how do you see text and video media in the future departing from more traditional journalistic formats? I think that's an interesting take.
Was that sort of text and media?
Yeah, so I suppose written probably means. So how do you see editorial and video media in the future departing from more traditional journalistic format? So I think we did touch on different formats before.
Yeah.
So how do you see that evolving, I guess? Got you there.
Some people can just embrace it, I would imagine, and make it work for them. Again, never quite sure on the finances of it, and certainly with video, requires some editing and more time spent with it, doesn't it? But yeah, as a whole package, there's bits there to use of everything.
And I think we did speak before that people are still interested in those long form features, whether they're kind of online or in print, and they still work well for you all.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if we're departing from a more traditional journalistic format. Yeah, a lot of the principles are the same, I suppose, in a good interview is a good interview, but certainly for me, we had a lot of success with kind of 30-minute video interviews, or occasionally even an hour, which were some of our most successful video content we produced. I think there's a misconception that video for the web just has to be really short form content, but there is an audience, people out there who want to watch like a little mini TV show, and actually you don't really get that time isn't given to stuff on TV anymore, so they're going to YouTube for that content with their favorite artist. I think Beats, Zane Lowe, whatever you may think of Zane Lowe, does really good video interviews with, you know, some of the biggest musicians around the world, which are longer form things. But yeah, I would say that's definitely something to explore. So it feels like quality content, but just presented differently.
It's nice to
Cool. So we've only got a few minutes left now. So I would love it if each of you could just summarise kind of what you think the future of music media and journalism is.
The 45.
Brilliant.
No, but I mean, it was sort of nice to see something launch for one thing, and having a niche seemed as good a way of building a fan base and an audience as anything. So yeah, that's...
Well, we'll see.
No pressure, you know.
And what about everyone else? Quick last few comments. I know, Charlie, you mentioned when we were talking before about audience behaviour is key.
Sorry, you're cutting out.
I know when we spoke before, you mentioned understanding what audience behaviour is important for the future.
Yeah, I think it's probably. I think Carlos's point about thinking differently and telling sort of different stories, moving away from broad formats of interview, review, news, and yeah, probably seeing it multimedia versions of all of that stuff, but just looking at how people are consuming stuff, or how just thinking about how you yourself are consuming things, and it's not really just reading stuff front to back always.
And Carlos, finally from you.
I think there's always going to be the need to read good stories about music. And I sometimes get the feeling that maybe our market is getting smaller. I sometimes get the feeling that it's like the vinyl, you know, when they say that the vinyl was going to disappear because of the CD, but finally the vinyl was again there. I mean, it's not sold as well as in the 80s or 90s, but it's still there. And I sometimes get the feeling that maybe music journalists is going to be something like that. I mean, we will have maybe a smaller audience, a niche audience maybe, but there's always going to be, at least for 1 or 2 generations, I hope so, there's always going to be a market and an audience to read good stories. It doesn't matter the format. And I wouldn't know what to say about the people who are now 20 years old, for example, 15 or 20 years old. I don't know if they're going to be consuming music information in their next decades, but I hope so. But I think that at least for the people who are used to read about music, they are going to have many magazines, and some magazines and some media and some websites to do it, and that's going to be always, I mean, not just music journalism. Journalism in general has been through many crises, and this is one of them, one of the biggest. But I think it's going to survive, of course.
Well, let's say positive for sure. I just want to thank you all for being here today. I've learned a lot today. I think you all brought up some really interesting points, and I'm definitely looking forward to reading some lovely music books in the future. I think that's the one for me. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for watching and your questions, and hope to see you in person at some time very soon. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks to you. Bye.
Oh. think we're done.